Jamie, I see Paul's on. Are we going to be able to interact?
Yes, give me 1 second here while I get this set up and then I'll kick off.
Okay.
Okay, so we are recording and live on YouTube for viewers at home. And this is a workshop, so we can have some conversation as it relates to the agreement before us tonight. But with that, before we get into the meeting, I'll let Terry, our chair of the Parks Commission, kick it off.
All right, so we will call to order the April 13th Park Trails and Lakes Commission workshop meeting. Do you want to do roll call, Jamie?
Yes, Chair Steenblock,
Here.
Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Gary, Commissioner Steenblock,
Here.
Commissioner Ramseth,
Here.
Commissioner Moorhead,
Here.
Commissioner Geyer.
Here.
All right, and then looking for an approval to the agenda for tonight's meeting.
Move approval.
Second.
Sorry, who did you get that, Jamie?
I was going to ask for clarification. I know I heard Commissioner Geyer and I believe I heard Commissioner Moorhead.
It could be Geyer. That's fine.
Okay. We'll put Geyer with a motion and Commissioner Steenblock, were you the second?
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion.
Chair Steenblock,
Aye.
Commissioner Steenblock,
Aye.
Commissioner Ramseth,
Aye.
Commissioner Moorhead,
Aye.
Commissioner Geyer.
Aye.
All right, so the next on the agenda is the open forum. Do we have any?
Have any
Okay.
open forum guests tonight or any submissions to the city? So nothing for open forum.
All right. So then we move on to the facility use agreement. And I think our goal tonight is to kind of walk through the agreement, see if we need any changes or comments or feedback. I think it would be best if we can walk through it section by section before we move on to the next one.
Yeah, I think that's great. And so just a quick, before we get into the actual contract before us, we're going to focus on contractual language of the agreement. This has been shared with the Forest Lake Athletic Association, and they did review this most updated version that you also received, and just overall feedback, everything they are comfortable with or in support of. There is one section that we will cover later when we get to it. It is section 13, where we just need to clarify items there. So when we get to section 13, we can talk a little bit more about that one item. Otherwise, currently this is an acceptable agreement to the Forest Lake Area Athletic Association. So tonight is the opportunity for the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission to review in detail. And like Chair Steenblock said, we will go through each section together. If you have a question on that particular section, please ask it then. And if there's any other additional questions or comments not covered, we'll get those at the end of once we get through everything. So this is your opportunity. Again, it's a work session, no action tonight. It's your opportunity to ask any questions and make sure that at the end of this workshop, it's an agreement that is acceptable to the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission. And our objective is to get consensus tonight that this could go to our April 20th meeting for a final approval from the Parks, Trails, and Lakes Commission. So if there aren't any questions, we can get started. Does anybody have any questions before we
Jamie,
begin?
I just have one.
Yeah.
I wasn't here long enough to type out the ones. Are we going, when you go through the sections, are we still going to be able to hear the comments from FLA as we go along?
Yep, those were already incorporated in here. So I will go through kind of our legal attorney side and then
Okay.
kind of talk through it. But yes, we can cover on that tonight. But everything that you have in that updated contract were feedback provided by FLA, and then our legal team implemented the changes that they were able to or saw necessary based on FLA's feedback. So all of that is incorporated in here, and I can pull it up on my screen. So what we're going through tonight, again, is acceptable to FLOG with the exception of section 13. We still have a little clarification there, which again, I think is very doable with our legal counsel to figure out what that language is. So does that make sense?
Okay.
All right, so would it be easier for commissioners if I share this on my screen so we're all looking at it at the same time?
I think that'd be good.
Yes.
Okay, so give me just 1 second here. I'll get that screen share going. Okay, let's see, 1 second here. I'm just gonna move it over here. Okay, so I'm gonna get this going. 3. Okay. Can everyone see the City of Forest Lake Fenway Athletic Complex Facility Use Agreement?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's two-sided. We'll start here on page 1. These are the, nothing really notable here. This just explains it's a facility use agreement. So it lays out your basic contract language, who this agreement is between. It's the City of Forest Lake and the Forest Lake Area Athletic Association. And just some recitals here that lists kind of each person's role, or that, you know, we desire to provide the association with priority use of the complex. So this gives FLA the opportunity to continue to be our primary user at Fenway Fields. And with this agreement, they are able to schedule accordingly, have that priority scheduling. And that kind of all is laid out in the beginning here. And then we have the term, which as soon as this contract is fully executed, we'll enter that date here. And it is a 1-year term, just expiring at the end of this year, unless obviously terminated for any other reason. And so then we talk about priority use, and I'll pause after this section here. So this just explains, again, this is defining what the association's role is. They have priority use over any other users for the athletic complex. And a key thing we mention is this is for its members' recreation program. So any of the FLA any team or sport under the FLA umbrella. And that is then listed here starting on page 2, football, baseball, fast pitch softball, and lacrosse. And is any questions so far?
What is
Do you
what's
want
the
minor
big-
grammatical things?
I think content is key right now, and we'll circle
Okay,
grammatical.
I'll just send it to you separate.
Yeah, let's focus on, I guess, content. Obviously grammatical is important, but let's do mostly content purposes for that.
Could you explain to me the crossouts, the yellow and the pink?
Yep, we didn't quite get there, but I will explain that to you.
Okay.
So moving on to letter B here, association. Part of this priority use agreement is that the city would require each member recreational program, so listed above, football, baseball, fast pitch, and lacrosse, to submit a schedule for city approval. And included in that they would have to the dates, the times, the total number of fields needed, and whether concessions will be used. We struck out letter number 2. We don't need to know about the amenities that was no longer relevant. The type of use, whether it's a game, practice, or scrimmage, and then the total number of registrations for within the FLA organization. And the things that you see struck out or in yellow were just changes that were reflected by our city attorney from the feedback from FLA. So what you see struck out was in the first version. We recently took number 2 out as an example. And then what's highlighted, I think she was just highlighted as that was something noted of a change that we'd want to point that out.
So I'm sorry, I'm really slow on this. So the crossed out is something that was changed. The yellow is that was left in, and then there's a pink highlighted.
Yep, and the pink highlighted is just if she made a comment. So you can see whatever is highlighted, here's the comment on the side associated with that. And one of the questions from FLA was just what information is collected if they need to tell their the families. And none of the information that we're looking to get is identifying information. We don't want names or any kind of detailed personal identification. We just want data so that we can utilize that for grant opportunities in the future and really understand how many, what is the use of the field? How is that broken down between different sports and different age ranges, so that when we're talking about future expansion, we can really understand where the needs are and what would be the facilities needed. So does that clarify it? It's just a tool on our program to show what the original proposal was and how it was changed.
So Karen, the things that are crossed out will no longer be in the next version, correct, Jamie?
Right. Yes, and I can, if you,
I get that. That makes sense. But then when you have highlighted yellow and highlighted pink, I'm trying to figure out which one I'm supposed to be paying attention to.
Think of the pink as there's just a comment. So if you, wherever you see pink, look to the right. And
I click on it, there's a comment associated with the pink. The yellow
Okay.
just as a way to bring attention to it, that is an important thing to note, but you don't really need to worry about the colors so much. If something is crossed off, that's not going to be there anymore. And what you want to just kind of read, what is existing still. So requested dates, times, total number of fields needed, and whether concessions will be used. That is what it will read, and that is acceptable to FLA.
Okay,
Is everyone good?
it is. On the right, mine is cut off by I got to get rid of our pictures. Otherwise I can't read all of the right.
Okay. So just moving forward in this section here, this is just talking about setting a timeline of when we need to get the schedules. And that's important just so that we have deadlines established so that after a certain period of time, if the fields are not in use by FLA, we can then open them up or they can be available for another user group. The original challenge with this one is we put 20 days prior just because each sport will start working on their schedule. And so far we've some information, but I do understand in work communications with FLA that some teams will not have a very specific schedule until maybe a week prior. So it's fine. It's acceptable to the city to reserve a block of time. So I'm just going to use fast pitch as an example. They know that they generally use the fields at Fenway Monday through Thursday from, I think it was 4 to 9 p.m. So we have that blocked off, but as their season gets closer, they'll be able to know, okay, on Monday night, we have 2 games or we have a double header. Tuesday night, we have a game and a practice, and they'll have a more specific schedule. And then that's where we added in here, and you see this pink, Karen, season schedules may be modified in writing by the consent of both parties. So if that just means that if they get once they get a more detailed schedule, they can just resubmit that, but they will have that block of time already reserved for them.
So it's a little, excuse me, it's a little change as the contract's not going to be in error if they don't have it within 20 days. I mean, that was pretty definite days. So that's been
Right.
changed.
Yep. So there's the
Yep.
season schedules can be modified.
Okay.
That was the change as a result of feedback from FLA. So moving on to payments. This is just, so the payment here, this is the amount that we'll receive from each member recreation program under FLA. And so we listed the amounts here, and this ended up being 65% of what the sports had paid FLA in the past. So that gives each sport organization or sport entity some funds still for field prep and other costs that FLA may have. The payment is due I put in 7 days prior to the start of the member recreation program season. This one I think is we can still discuss. I'm not sold on 7 days. We just have to put some kind of deadline in there for payment. It doesn't have to be 7 days. So that's something tonight we can figure out how that works. I just, put in 7 for now. So that's kind of a discussion tonight of what that needs to look like. So that's the payment section. Are there any questions on payment or any thoughts on how soon prior to using the fields?
I kind of have one question, Jamie.
Yep.
If you total all those up, A through D,
Yep.
It gives you a number of 27,690. And so how does that differ from what FLA paid in the previous years?
So like, how does that differ from what flaws collected in years from the teams?
From the previous years, and yeah, sorry, we got a barker here.
That's okay. So they had collected a total of $42,300 from the
Okay,
sports, and that total amount was to cover field use and other expenses that they had out at Fenway. So they will still have costs for field prep and a handful of other miscellaneous costs for equipment and materials. So that's the difference.
so theirs was 42.3, and then that was their cost, and so the 27,690 is lower then, is that right?
Yeah, we're collecting 65% of what the teams had previously paid. So that additional 35% that teams were paying is still available for FLA to use for their field prep costs and materials and supplies.
Okay. And then how does that, so the difference from that 27,690, it makes up the fees listed in the, I'm sorry, I'm getting so the 27,690 and the city's maintenance cost I'm gonna see if I can get this right.
Are you wondering like how that, with this revenue coming in from the FLA sports this year to the city, how does that compare to our field expense cost?
Yeah, yep.
So that's something city council had asked as well. So if we collect the 27, 690, I don't know if you can see this up here on my screen.
Okay,
I had this for council too, but so we have the 27,690, and this is our estimated cost. We won't really fully know, but it looks like $42,000 is about what it would look like for our maintenance costs.
okay.
So
Okay.
so does that kind of answer what you're asking?
Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, so any other payment questions or comments?
So Jamie, do you want to discuss the 7 days here, or do you want to circle back around? Do we want to tackle it while we're here, or what do you want to do?
I think we could tackle it while we're here. And yeah, I don't have an answer on it. It's for discussion, but we have to remember that the season started at different times. So right now, baseball and softball have access to fields. We want them to get out and use them as they're able to right now. So it's kind of, right now, it's not really applicable to the spring sports, but let's talk about like football and lacrosse. We could just pick some period of time. Our attorney suggested we had just a number in there so we know that we're having a deadline. So if a season's going to start September 1st or whatever that might be, we just have to make sure we have payment prior.
So
Can I make a suggestion?
What are you calling the season? Is that when they start practicing, or is that when, I'll say, league games start?
I would say when they start practicing, but we got Paul Kozak here with FLA, and so I think he chimed in with making a suggestion. So that'd be great if you have one.
Yeah, I would actually put an actual date for probably baseball, fast pitch, and lacrosse. I would say maybe April 15th.
Okay.
And then football is more likely, probably September 15th. I can't say for sure for football. I can find out, and it's going to be different this year for football because the school is going to be under construction. Normally, they do everything with practices and tryouts and everything over at the high school.
Right.
But with that all torn up, more things are going to happen out at Fenway, so they're going to start earlier.
Sure.
But I would put a date because Doug was right. It's what is the start of the season. So I would actually put a date and just For baseball, fast pitch, and lacrosse. Lacrosse is a spring sport. I would say maybe April 15th, if that works with you,
Yeah.
for you guys. And then
Yep.
football, I can get back to you, but normally would be probably be like mid-September,
Sure.
but this year would probably be different.
So thank you for that. And I think given the timeline with this and when the contract's approved, what about April 30th? Because we hopefully could, assuming next Tuesday, the 20th, we can provide an approval of the contract to city council. The city council would then have this on Monday, April 26th. Does that seem acceptable?
Certainly to fly, yeah.
So Jamie,
Then we would have a fully executed contract and then say now payments due by the 30th of April. If that's an okay turnaround time for FLA, just a couple days. Does that give you enough time?
I think, yeah, we
Okay.
actually have a board meeting that earlier, the week before that we can give them a heads up that say this is what's going to be due and when.
Okay.
Jamie,
Sorry.
do we want to build any wiggle room? Like maybe just say, I hate to say it, but like May 15th, just in case there's delays with the signature of the agreement so that you don't, even if it's agreed upon, if the agreement isn't signed until later and you're requesting fees before the agreement is signed, it just
Yeah,
seems odd to me.
I have no problem with that.
Is that going to prohibit any of the teams from starting? I mean, is that what we have to know? Is that going to work for FLA? I mean,
It will. It will.
Yeah.
okay.
Fields are available as we finalize this process. So
This is just
cities on.
This is just making sure, what I'm recommending is making sure that we're not requesting a payment before the date on the agreement.
Right.
That sounds like a good idea to me.
If they make it early, is that a problem?
No?
Okay.
All right. So I will 15th, for what it's worth, is a Saturday. Maybe I'll just put Friday, May 14th.
So it would say by payment is due in full by X date. Or would you say, I mean, if we want to get at what Karen's saying, do you want to say on or before?
We can do that. I don't think we're gonna,
I mean,
but it does. I don't think that's gonna matter.
okay.
That, but I'll just put on or before May 14th, and that's gonna be for baseball, fast pitch, and lacrosse. And then we're gonna put on or before September 15th for football.
Jamie, will you provide invoices, or how will they know where to send it? Or
We can provide an invoice, is not a problem.
okay, cool. One for each sport, please.
Yep.
Thanks.
No problem. Is everyone good with that? And just a reminder, we'll get the final, these updates that we talk about tonight will be made and brought back next Tuesday for a final approval from the Parks, Trails and Lakes Commission and then to City Council. Is everyone good on that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Good.
Let's move forward then on number 4, which is city responsibilities. So FLA provided some really good feedback to clarify, what are the city's responsibilities and association responsibilities. So what you see here is primarily was provided from FLA, which we really appreciated. You probably all read this over. I don't really need to go through, I don't think, city responsibilities in great detail because there were no questions or concerns. So if anyone has any questions on city's responsibilities, it just explains we're doing all the maintenance for the complex, lists that out in detail. Our role is to make sure we have safe, playable conditions. We're going to empty trash and recycling outside the quad on a regular basis, provide portables, and manage and maintain the scheduling of the activities at Fenway and other city facilities. This is pertinent to Fenway. Any questions on this?
I have one, and I don't know if it even belongs here. Because I understand this is between us and FLA, or the city and FLA. But let's say we do get to a position where we let someone else use one of the ball fields. Would it then be the city's responsibility to make sure that, the infield's raked and the you know, that it's put back into the shape that it was found?
Yes, that would be city responsibility. City is not going to be doing field prep, which is not listed here as a city responsibility. So if somebody else wanted to use the fields, whether it's a game or what, you know, if it was a game, for example, and they needed field prep services, we could refer them to FLA, and then FLA could work with them directly if they wanted to provide that field prep service to this outside of FLA organization. But yes, otherwise it would be, you know, city's responsibility if they need to be raked or anything like that. But this agreement, you're right, is between the city and FLA for FLA priority use. So FLA's entities. So.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it through. If someone else uses the field in between, are they gonna find it in the shape that they left it? That's my only question.
I would say yes, but I think, are you talking about like if, let's say that Fenway has it, FLA has it reserved for a game and it's the field prep has been done or something along those lines?
Yeah, and we let some other group use that field, right?
Right. So from where we're at with some of the scheduling, with the priority use, you know, even if there's not a game until 4 o'clock, I think what I'm seeing is that's getting scheduled starting at like 1 o'clock so that the fields have time to be, you know, prepped and everything prior to the game. So it won't be available for use for other groups, you know, early enough so that if the field prep is done, no one will be on, you know, should be on there.
Okay.
It's a
So
good
Betty, are
point.
you talking about the scenario if Tuesday I rent those fields and I have a baseball game out there and I don't rake the fields and empty the trash or whatever? Is that what you're talking about? You're not talking about chalking the lines for the
No.
game or?
No, I'm talking about those things that we expect FLA to do when they use the fields. If we let someone else use the fields, it shouldn't be FLA's responsibility to take their trash out and do all that. That's what I'm talking about. So I know I'm not explaining it very well.
No, that clarification was helpful, and it would be the city's responsibility.
Okay.
So under this agreement, if any of the FLA groups have it scheduled and are using the complex, this is what they would be required to do. If it's not, then it is city responsibility.
Okay, fair enough.
And Betty, I'm so glad you brought that up because you know I'm an advocate of not having anyone use that field other than the athletic complex people because of just that reason, you know, not only just the trash, but just digging up grass or infield or whatever. I mean, it's just, I'm glad this is a 1-year contract because I'm going to be very anxious to see how this all plays out, if indeed anybody even wants to use it. And if they do, how that is all taken care of. Because again, I go back to way back when this was an athletic complex, not a picnic ground.
Yeah,
So,
and I think we can continue those conversations, and I think we need this year to see how that goes. But I think, you know, anything that's outside of FLA's use is the city's responsibility for maintenance and care. So if there's no more questions on number 4, we'll move on to association responsibilities. Again, this is highlighted. This is a comment that our attorney made here, and this just talks about what FLA's responsible in the contract. So they're responsible for preparing the fields for their member recreational programs. So any of the FLA, like painting the fields for FLA use, chalking fields, returning the fields to good condition after use, including raking the batting areas, pitching mound around the bases, empty the trash and recycling inside the quad after their use. And then they're providing the schedules, the proof of insurance, and the payment, which some of it we've already talked about, and then the insurance we'll talk about when we get to that item. So the reason that this comment was made here was that originally FLA suggested that if they're doing the field prep for non-FLA activities, they had proposed some fees for that. And our city attorney just said that this agreement we're looking at is not any third-party arrangement. So like I said before, we'd be happy to refer anybody else to FLA directly, whether that's Paul or Al directly or somebody else, and they can provide that field prep service. And then FLA would be able to just work with that other party to coordinate the field prep. And then FLA would just provide that fee to that user. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that was why we didn't make any changes there. Moving on to number 6, concession operations. So during their member association activities, the FLA has the right to manage and operate concession stand. And then these 3 items following just are the kind of your basic things that standard contract language, right? So the safe and efficient manner, you know, they have to have the proper license or food storage and follow kind of all those guidelines within running a concession stand. So they have to provide all the supplies and equipment, and they provide the food and beverage. And we just took out this 4th item here, that if it's up to FLA's discretion for their activities, if they want to run the concession stand or not. And the feedback from FLA was that they're going to do their best effort to operate it for their FLA activities under their discretion, if it's going to be, make sense for them, if 2 or more fields are being used. So if they choose to, that's their choice. And if they don't, that's their choice as well. So it really shouldn't impact the city. So we took that one out.
Hey, Jamie, I think we have somebody in the waiting room.
Oh, hold on 1 second here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I wasn't aware of that. I've got a couple screens going, so I was looking at a different screen. Okay. We'll get back to that in just a second. Hi there. Sorry for I had a different screen up, so I didn't see you guys were waiting, so I apologize. We're going to continue on. We're just walking through the different sections of the contract, talking about some of the changes made and feedback from FLA. So
okay. Yeah, I didn't receive the invite, so I'm digging and trying to figure out how to find you.
Okay, I'm sorry for that.
That's all right.
Okay, so we're gonna get back. We're just talking about number 6, concession stand operation. Does anyone have any questions on these items and the changes that were made?
Actually, I have another question, Jamie.
Sure.
So above on the I think it was on number 5, the city attorney said they don't want to cover any third-party agreements on the association responsibilities. So then if you scroll back down to concession, the one that's where it's so that's struck out. It says, so it's okay for FLA to do like a third-party agreement on the concession stand?
It doesn't, not to do a third-party agreement, but FLA, they would operate the concession stand themselves for their FLA-related events and activities. And I think, and somebody can speak, to this better than I can, but I think like sometimes they have volunteers, sometimes they have paid staff, and
Okay.
they operate the concession stand for their FLA activities. So nights when there's games, or if it's a FLA tournament, that they would be responsible for that. Did I correctly on that?
Yeah. The only thing I would add is that it would be our intent that if there are other events out there, we would certainly want to, have the concession stand open if it makes sense for that event, not just a FLA. We certainly want to offer those services to others who are out there using it. That makes the most sense. What we've learned over years is the more often it's open, the better, because then people expect it to be open.
Sure.
And then they don't stop and fill their coolers on the way, or stop at Burger King or whatever when they're coming to a game or whatever. So
sure. No, that's good to note. I'll circle back with our attorney and see if there's any or what can add to make sure that's reflected, or if that might be a third party thing. So let me just follow up with her, but I'll make note of that. It might just be another city contact FLA separately from this to say we have a non-FLA event, you want to run concession. So it might be just handled that way is what my impression would be, but we'll make sure that's covered, or we understand that.
Jamie, just on that means, clear it up for me. That means that the city would not be operating it on their own when they want, with keys and people having keys. This would clear up the fact that the concession stand would be operated by FLA at their discretion.
Yes, for any of their FLA association events.
Great.
This contract, and if there are other non-FLA activities, we would reach out, we would talk to FLA as an opportunity. But focusing on FLA will manage the concession stands at their discretion for their events. And
that makes much more sense.
Okay. All right, if hearing no other, I will continue. So number 7 is simple compliance with laws. This is just standard contract language. No changes from city or flaw. Repairs, maintenance, and cleanup. This is again, just kind of clarifying kind of roles and responsibilities, and flaw did provide a suggestion to clarify or make it clear how that shall be submitted to the city. So that's why you see this red here. Association shall submit a written notice to the city's Public Works Department to notify the city of any needed repairs or maintenance. So that was added at FLA's request. And I think that's a good point to have in there so it's clear. And then we also added, just to clarify, damage does not include ordinary wear and tear on the fields. Obviously, we know that that happens on an annual basis. So again, that was a suggestion to clarify what that would look like. So that was the language we added, and again, is acceptable to FLA. Nothing has changed here with number 9, right of entrance. It's more, again, legal language, just that FLA understands that the city has the right to enter the athletic complex. It's just an access piece, that they can't change the locks without written approval by the city. So nothing's changed from the city or FLA on that one.
So Jamie, on that one, if they can't change the locks without the city's approval, why would we put the burden on them to do it if they had city's approval? So can we just say association may not change or alter any locks? And then if they reach out to you and there's a need to alter or change the locks, then the city would be responsible for taking care of that.
That's fine with me if that's acceptable to FLA.
Yeah, that's fine. The locks have all been provided by the city anyways, so.
Right, I think that makes sense. All right, so I'll make note of that. Anything else on number 9? Okay, so number 10, cancellations due to weather or health risks. So this just talks about that the city will have the right to cancel or suspend any use of the fields when conditions could result in injury, risk to the safety, individual safety or health, or cause damage to the fields or facilities. So then it's the list of things and reasons why, which we also included the public health risks if we have another experience with COVID and need to have closures. And let's see, so there was a comment here. So the city shall make a good faith effort to notify the association by 2 p.m. on any day when the fields or athletic complex shall be closed. And just because this is an agreement between city and FLA, the city will notify Al and Paul of that potential closure. And then our attorney noted that it'll be their responsibility to notify the individual sports teams. And one question I have on this, and I know I think it's always been 2 p.m. as your deadline to cancel, correct? Is 2:30 or 3 o'clock too late for traveling teams?
It depends where they're coming from. I mean, the sooner we can let them know, the better.
Okay.
So it's, as soon as somebody knows, let us know so we can inform the teams. And things can change too. I mean,
Yeah.
At 2 o'clock, it could be sunny, but there's a big storm coming in. And we might have to wait till 3:30 before we know if it's going to hit.
Yeah. And the reason I ask is I just know with Arts in the Park and community events, Tuesdays, I'm following the radar a lot closer than I really want to. And sometimes usually 3 o'clock is my cutoff to feel comfortable of, we have a band traveling in. So somewhere between 2 or shortly thereafter. But I think if the good faith effort and if there's that communications piece, if we're like, well, maybe this is going to clear, let's give it another half an hour. I think we can work together on communicating with FLA on that to make that final determination.
Yeah.
And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Nope, go ahead, Paul.
Well, the only thing I would not necessarily to put in here, but just kind of the way things have worked in the past is that particularly in the spring or if we've had heavy rains, somebody needs to go out and check the fields, and because we don't want anybody damaging the fields, whether it's a FLA
Right.
sport or anybody else. So it's not necessarily a safety risk, but the grass could be too mushy or things like that. So, Al would typically be making a trip out there every day, trying to determine if the fields are playable and that kind of thing. So we just want to make sure someone at the city is, that's kind of their thing, is to be checking them, because we're not planning on it since it's
Yes.
the city's thing now.
Yeah, and thank you for that comment. And we will have somebody from Public Works checking on the fields. Public Works staff Monday through Friday is staffed until about 3 or 3:30, which is before that cutoff anyhow. So somebody from Public Works, whether it's our Dave Adams, our director, or one of his park maintenance crew staff, somebody will be checking field conditions for that reason, and we'll have that covered. So. All right.
And then Jamie, are we adding in, I think it's important, Amanda's comment there. Just for clarity, do we want to, that will be added in, the city shall make a good faith effort by 2 p.m.
Yes, that is added in here. That text is added.
That's added in here, but then it will be the association's responsibility to notify the sports teams. Can we add that in there just so we know who's on first, what's on second?
I'm just making a quick note of that. Okay.
Was that pun intended?
It worked, I guess. I didn't think about it until after I said it. Most people wouldn't even know what that meant, but
All right, I made a note of that. If there's anything else, if not anything else, I'll move forward or on to number 11, capital improvements. So this just states here, nothing changed, but it just says the city is responsible for capital improvements at the athletic complex and shall be made at its sole discretion. There is a comment. FLA did provide a suggestion or an item for discussion, and it was indicated that, let me just pull this up here. So for the discussion item, FLA would like to consider with FLA and city partnering on improvements, and did want to have a discussion on that. So maybe we can turn to that discussion here in a minute. And just to talk about, they acknowledge and appreciate what the city has done, but just want to discuss how this process can be continued on some of the needs at the athletic complex. So our city attorney made a comment that if the city and FLA want to partner on capital projects in the future, that we would handle that outside of this facility use agreement, and it would just be the city and FLA, either it's another agreement or some other process. And what I explained to FLA is that, we want to have a facilities committee because we know we need a capital plan for Fenway and some of our other facilities. So what are those needs? And then build out a 5-year plan. And once we have that 5-year plan in collaboration with representatives from FLA, the city, and maybe some other user groups, then we can really put that plan together and align resources accordingly. And that's where we can say, well, FLA might say, well, we're really interested in helping with this capital project. And we can identify that as we work through that and then follow our donation process where, if FLA says we want to contribute a certain dollar amount or resources, we would handle that kind of as like a separate project outside of this agreement. So kind of a long summary of why we didn't make any additional language in the contract, but we would love that partnership and it would just be handled separate from this contract.
So Jamie, I did have a question on this section. I was wondering if we could write, so I like in 8 how with repairs and maintenance that FLA is submitting a written notice to the city on that. Is there some way we could put in here that FLA should submit capital improvement suggestions to whoever? That way we've got them on record, and as we look at either strategic planning or quarterly plans, if we had additional funds or whatever the case might be, we would have their list as well and could consider it with everything else if they were able to.
Yeah, I don't see any harm or that really changing any of the context of the agreement. It's just saying if they have any recommendations for capital in writing to the cities, that could be the Park and Recreation Department or something simple. So that doesn't really change the context. And so I don't see that from the city side being any problem if we just add that sentence in.
Because then we would know what the needs are, either a little bit more real time, and I think could consider them as we're looking at things. And then if Paul and Al win the lottery and somebody else is looking at this agreement, they would know that there would be an avenue for them as well to submit them.
You're saying if you got wealthy, you would dump us. Is that what you're saying, Terry?
No, I'm not.
Just a couple comments. So we have actually provided a list like that in the past, and we're happy to do that again. We'll find that again, and we'll be happy to send that over again. And with what Jamie was talking about of, you know, working with the committee on improvements, we would like to see, if possible, we get started on that as soon as possible, because there are things out there that are issues now that aren't a 5-year thing. I mean, you know, there are dangerous areas of warning tracks and things like that. And FLA wants to, you know, we want to be partners with the city. And so we want to help where we can, and we're going to have to rely on the city where we have to. So the sooner we can get those discussions going on not only the 5-year plan, but the kind of the immediate needs, just to see what can be done. I mean, for example, on field 1, the gate to go into the big gate to go in the field, the concrete is pushed up and it's sitting up above the foot, above the ground, and that kind of thing. And, you know, we pointed that out, but it's something that really needs to get fixed. So the gate doesn't even close now. So just, you know, just little things like that we'd like to start the conversation on, and not wait, you know, 2 or 3 months.
Jamie, I really appreciate the conversation, because to me, that is what a true partnership is, that you're going to have the ability to chat with one another, and it's not going to be so formal, but it's going to be an opportunity for everyone to know what is going on. And then certainly if he has a list that they've had before, to have, to Terry's point, it's nice to have a list if there's things out there that they want to do. But I'm encouraged by the fact that I'm hearing a lot of, we're going to work with them, we're going to talk with them, because I think that's for the benefit of both city and FLA.
What I hear Paul talking about now, to me, is a maintenance issue. It's not a capital improvement. It should be on the list now from a maintenance standpoint.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that would be the one that you just referred to, but I do have the list of capital here in front of me, with some of it, you know, a lot of it I think aligns with some of that expansion. And so I think revisiting that and what those priorities are, if it's lighting, if it's more fields, if it's a new concession facility or another big picnic shelter. I think those conversations should start right now as well, and build that plan out, and then kind of have that punch list of things like, I see you need some more trees, or, you know, what are some of those punch list maintenance tasks that Public Works can have on their list, so that when they have the resources and time available, that's just on their list with all our other city parks and all our other city projects that they work on. And the appropriate person will have that, whether it's the parks or the parks maintenance person. Then they just have a running list, and they're like, okay, this needs to be done at Fenway. I have the time and resources. I'm going to go do that project next week. And so they can plan that out. So I think, you know, in the next couple of weeks, if there's those immediate needs, as long as there's that understanding that we kind of have to assess current status of what else needs to be done and prioritize those, we can, you know, 1 or 2 things maybe we'll be able to get done depending on that cost, but just really understanding that if we have the list, we'll continue to work on those improvements as our resources and are allowed for this year, given the budget, and then continue to plan and budget moving forward. So I would say in the next couple weeks, immediate needs, and then continue in the next month or so, just those conversations on where we're going.
Right.
So a last note is that city budgets we start those conversations in early summer, which is coming already, and they're finalized by the end of August. So that's a good opportunity to really look at like what should be our priority next year and see what that's going to look like.
Okay. Yeah. And an example of partnering is, Al and I were just talking about this, I don't know, last week or the week before, is he's been contacted by a couple families who asked about donating a tree to the facility. So things like that, where, you know, we hear about things, we know about things, we certainly have a large family base. And, you know, if we put the word out that, hey, if you can get together with a few of your families and donate $300, we can, you know, work with the city to get a tree put in, or that kind of thing. So
yeah,
that's kind of what we're talking about with the partnership is, you know, we both have access to multiple resources for various things, that it would be good to work together.
Yeah, and just to close the point on that, Dave Adams and I actually talked about 2 weeks ago, as we were talking about a tree program, and, you know, he said, I can't remember the dollar amount, but if we want to start a tree donation program, it's this $200. You write a check to the city to accept that, and then you get to determine where that goes, and Public Works will buy it and put it in. So I think, you know, I think it's a good example to show how we can pool our resources, from your connections and what we have available to really leverage that opportunity. So I think that's great to comment on and be aware of. So if everyone's good with that, let's see. So that we'll add that little bit about capital. Moving on to utilities, it's just city will pay for all utility costs. I don't think there's any questions there. So number 13, furnishings and equipment. So this is highlighted in yellow just because to draw attention that there was some changes to this. So all existing fixtures, signs, landscaping, scoreboards, and other items at the athletic complex shall remain property of the city, but may be used by the association during the term of this agreement. We did strike out and change, so we took out a sentence about the reasonable care and maintenance of these items. So this is the one item in the contract. Maybe we can have a discussion on it. We're not quite there, and I didn't have time with our city attorney to figure out what that language would be, but FLA is just recommending or asking for a little more specifics on who owns what. And this kind of came over just this afternoon, so I'm not as prepared on discussing it tonight, but I think it's very doable on the city's end to take their feedback and work with our attorney on clarifying some of that ownership. And I think that maybe for tonight, we can just talk a little, make sure we're on the same page. But I think it was the contents in the concession building, the shed, and the two storage containers.
Correct.
How about the scoreboards, et cetera, that have all been purchased by FLA?
So anything that's a permanent structure, the contracts were, so this furnishings and equipment language was in the last version of the contract. And so signing that says that all existing fixtures, signs, landscaping, that becomes city property of the city. So anything permanent, that's something that you can like take and leave, really I think is considered city property. And again, I'm not going to speak much because it's more of a city, I got to check with my attorney on that component of it, but she'll be able to, I think, clarify to FLA's question of some of those items they'd commented on and add that into the contract.
So it's almost like the personal property that FLA has out there that we would need to incorporate in here to make it clear that like the hot dog roller, I don't even know if you have one of those, but for example, whatever is in the concession stand, that is that.
Yeah, and looking at it briefly, just like I said this afternoon, I think that and other items might need to be struck out because we don't own what's in the storage sheds. We don't own what's, some of your equipment and your supplies. And I think some of that, so again, I'm going to defer that to our legal counsel just because they'll be able to structure it accordingly. But I don't think that that's an issue or a challenge. So I think if, by tomorrow, if I can get some feedback from our legal counsel, I can work with Paul and Al to make sure we get to an agreeable stance on that. And then that would be reflected in the contract for April 20th.
I think, Jamie, I think the one other word that may be of issue is the word equipment. Because all of the equipment that's out there is owned by FLA, whether it's the field drags or rakes or whatever else out there. At least that's what's stored out there. And I don't know if the city intends to store things out there, but so just something else to consider that, the city doesn't have any equipment out there that I know of, and maybe it's furnishings and infrastructure.
Yeah, I think that makes good sense. There's just some adjustments, like some wordsmithing and maybe removing, clarifying that. And I don't think it's something that I think it's very doable. So if I can just have till tomorrow afternoon and work with Paul and Al, unless Parks Commission, do you have any other comments or feedback?
From a
clarifying
perspective, Jamie, I would say you would want to be as explicit here as possible. I mean, even the minute I read and other items, I thought, what does that mean?
Right.
So my suggestion would be to be, again, as explicit as possible in this section about who owns what.
Jamie, is there a way that
even if you have to inventory them in the context of the contract, right?
Right.
So,
is there a way to leverage real versus personal property? Because other could be a picnic table, for example. But if it's nailed down, then it becomes real property versus personal property. I don't know if that's an option, but I would hate to have us, I agree with Kathy in that, you know, like some of the equipment and the storage units, that stuff, I think we should be really explicit on, but I'd hate to have us get to the point too where we have to put park equipment, picnic table, whatever it might be. So if there's a way for them to write.
Well, the
I'll make sure that
the
I'll pass that.
definition is, as you say, Terry, you're exactly right. It's anything that's permanently affixed.
Yeah.
Okay, permanently affixed. Anything you can pick up and walk away with is not.
Right,
Park.
good point.
Yep.
Okay. That's the,
Yeah, and I think
And you're gonna work
that's-
with each other on that and come up with an agreement. I think that's just the best way to do it.
Yeah, I think the permanent and non-permanent is a good way to potentially define ownership, and we can be very explicit if it's listing or, you know, some of those key components. But I think our legal staff will be able to do that given the feedback. And then I think if everyone here is in consensus of that's the intent, is clarifying a little more specifically of what is city owned versus FLA owned, and it's permanent versus non-permanent. I think that if that's acceptable to FLA, I think that'd be acceptable to the city.
Yes.
Okay, so we have some work on that. I should hear back by tomorrow afternoon, and I'll just continue. I'll send that over to Paul and Al and get to a point that we're both in agreement on that, and then that'll just be reflected in the updated contract for Parks Commission April 20th. I can't remember why this one is highlighted, but alterations, additions, improvements. I don't know if she changed anything, but I think basically this just says your standard contract language that you need written approval from the city to do any major improvements. It's pretty basic contract language. You can bring in additional portables if you have a FLA tournament and need more, you know, temporary fencing, signage, trash receptacles. I think she highlighted this actually because it does talk about any fixtures, equipment, or items permanently added to the athletic complex following written approval by the city shall become property of the city upon termination or expiration of this agreement. So if FLA presented the city with a request to make a permanent alteration and the city approved it, this is just saying that FLA understands that permanent fixture that they're going to implement is going to remain property of the city. So it's pretty standard language, and there was no questions or I don't think any comments from FLA on that one.
No, I don't believe so.
So the rest here is pretty quick, I think, to get through compliance with the laws. We can kind of just go through these quick. So they're gonna agree to comply with any laws. Insurance and indemnification requirements. This is again pretty standard. These are amounts, insurance requirements are the amounts required by the state of Minnesota. So these are all listed here. You find this in pretty much just about every, contract. Association shall provide evidence of the insurance prior to the execution of this agreement. So I think with that, just making sure that when we have this contract signed, we get a copy of insurance. We've received the insurance in the past. Failure to do so could fall under the termination component, which we'll talk about next, but again, not concerned about that. So we just need to make sure we have their insurance. Any questions on this?
No.
Okay. We're almost to the end here. Again, this is pretty quick. So hold harmless is standard contract language that the city is not liable. You guys can read that, no questions. Termination of the agreement. This is again, I think fairly similar to our last contract, just the standard, what constitutes a breach of contract, failure of insurance, payment, providing season schedules, again, just listed out for reference. And last couple things, modification of agreement. At any point in time, this is a 1-year contract, but if something would come up, the city and FLA can make a modification if in writing and signed by both parties. So there's an opportunity to change something if we get going and we're a month in and something isn't working, or needs to be further clarified, there's the option to do so. And just your governing law, and then this is where it will be signed by Mayor Bain, Administrator Casey, and down here, the Athletic Association. So I know that's a kind of the deep dive, but hopefully, you know, the goal again tonight is consensus of both parties. And I think flaws, except for that one section we're going to finalize, I think we're at a, acceptable to flaw. And if there's any other questions or comments tonight that Parks, Trails and Lakes Commission has, I'd like those tonight with the goal of bringing a final contract next Tuesday, April 20th for action, considered approval.
I just appreciate again the cooperation that everyone seems to be having with each other, because that's for the best for everybody. And I hope that continues after the first year contract, but for sure for this contract.
Yeah, and I just want to say thanks to Paul and Al for providing really detailed information to really help guide from their perspective. Items for the contract is really helpful and was a pretty seamless process. So I appreciate that feedback and input. So thank you to Paul and Al for that.
And I can fill Al in on the little bit that he missed before he was able to join the meeting or got invited in. So
Yeah. and I
I'll get him up to
apologize
date
for
on
that.
those.
Okay.
Well, thank you from thousands and thousands of kids and families. Let's get this thing done.
Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, I will take feedback from tonight, update, and have it to the Parks, Trails and Lakes Commission next Tuesday at our regular meeting. Everyone's good?
Good.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Thanks for your feedback, everybody.
All right, so next on the agenda is Arts in the Park.
All right, so let me just, if I can have 1 minute to transfer here to my next item. Just give me 1 second here as I transition.
So Jamie, you wanted, like Betty mentioned a couple grammar and I saw one typo. You want those by tonight?
That would be great if you don't mind.
Okay. All right.
Okay, just give me 1 second. I'm almost ready to go here. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna just bring up another presentation here. Okay, so does everybody see this Arts in the Park presentation?
Yep.
Okay, so for tonight on the workshop, again, just kind of an informal opportunity to talk about arts in the park. We are still navigating through the COVID-19 pandemic and really need to look at some, what is it that we're up against for restrictions? What are our opportunities? How can we accomplish getting people back together safely? And what that all looks like right now as of today, April 13th. So I'm gonna just take probably about 5 or maybe 10 at the most minutes to go through a few things. I've done a lot of research. I've looked into what other communities are doing. I've contacted the Minnesota Department of Health, Stay Safe Minnesota. I've been looking into every component of this to understand what requirements we'd have from a compliance standpoint and a safety for the community. So I'm going to share this with you. I summarized it. And at the end of this, I will open it up for discussion. I really, after tonight, would like some consensus on how we can move forward. And I'm bringing forward a recommendation tonight, but I feel like it's for this year, one that I think we can do safely and in compliance with executive orders. So with that said, I'm going to start going through this here. Just a quick recap. So our Arts in the Park is typically every Tuesday evening, June through August, and it's at Lakeside Memorial Park. Our Arts in the Park event includes the farmers market, other vendors. So we have a variety of other vendors, food trucks, and the concert series. And in a normal year, our weekly attendance can be anywhere from 300 people in the park to over 1,000 people in a night. So it really is varied. But I would say mostly on average, I would say at least 500 to 700 people on a more regular basis. Sometimes attendance is pending.
What's the hours of operation usually?
So we've done 5 to 9. The last 2019 vendors started kind of packing up around 8:30. So kind of the 8:30 is really the unofficial end of it. but the park was usually cleared out by 9. So 5 to 9.
Okay, thank you.
So just from last year for 2020, due to COVID-19, we did not have Arts in the Park in its full capacity. The farmers market was considered essential. So we did have the farmers market. At the time of planning it, we were only allowed about 10 people at a time. You had to have one-way flow of traffic. You had to have a controlled environment, and you had to honor social distancing and masks and everything. So we did relocate that to Fenway Park just so we had more space in the parking lot. We had vendor participation was down just because of the pandemic. Some people chose not to participate. So we did start it on Tuesday, July 7th. And that actually worked pretty well because a lot of the farmers market vendors didn't have product until around that time anyhow. And we saw an average about 150 people per evening. So some nights we had more and some nights we had less. But we did have the farmers market last year. So for this year, for 2021, things are still restricted, not to the capacity it was last summer, but we are still operating under a Minnesota executive order, which is the 2111-11. So right here just provides you a brief recap of what an outdoor event and entertainment would look like for us. So Arts in the Park in its full capacity, full event with all the components would be a non-seated outdoor venue. So we have capacity restrictions that we need to follow under that arrangement. As you can see, social distancing is required and masks are required. And I'll talk more about that here in a minute. But you also see there's a venue occupancy calculator. And when you click on that, it brings you to the state of Minnesota's website. And you basically enter the square footage of your outdoor event space that could be occupied by people. And there's a formula it calculates and it tells you your capacity. So for us, this is what this would look like. It's a little difficult to see, but I just wanted to get an idea of what we could be working with. So this whole event space, I just estimated the parameters of where vendors would set up, where the concert would take place, where people are walking through the park for shopping. I didn't include the playgrounds and some of the other area over here just to kind of get a benchmark of what our capacity could look like. So within that space, we could have 774 people. And just as a comparative, I was curious to know, what if someone was there just for a concert? Like you just show up and you go to a concert and you sit down and you listen to the concert. So I looked at the area that I thought was most relatable to that, and that would be about 338 people. But per the state of Minnesota, the capacity, that's our maximum capacity, and it has to be reduced if we can't have social distancing. So that was just a good benchmark to understand kind of what we'd be working with from a capacity standpoint. So with that said, farmers markets during COVID-19, as I mentioned last year, are considered essential. So that is the same this year. So they have exclusions in the governor's executive orders. So obviously we need a COVID plan, but if you're having a basic farmers market where it's the customers are stopping and shopping for products, there's no lingering or gathering, no food consumption on site, then you don't have any capacity restrictions to be responsible for. So this is just like going to the grocery store or going shopping at any of the retail stores. You can go in and get what you need and leave. In addition to the no capacity limits, shoppers don't have to wear masks. Workers only have to wear masks if the social distancing is not met, which is required. And just like last year, we had hand sanitizer, or we could add a hand washing station, and then you can have market info booths are allowed. So to me, that's not very restrictive. I think that's very manageable to set up different booths within the park and have our farmers market. As you can see, the Power of Produce, which is a kid-friendly activity for the farmers market, that would be allowed as long as people aren't gathering and lingering. And then it also says craft vendors, if our location can physically handle them, are also welcome at our market again. So this little graphic here is what they recommend for spacing out the vendor booths just to allow for social distancing. So I would recommend we follow that requirement.
Good news so far.
So far. Okay, so at this slide here, this just tells us I think the farmer's market, we could add craft vendors back in. But again, this is operating under a farmer's market, a basic farmer's market, and there's exemptions from executive orders. But if we would like to add music or on-site food consumption like we would for our concerts and our food trucks, we are now considered a farmer's market as a venue. And then, as it states here, we have a lot more, we have to implement more precautions. So I kind of list everything, but face masks are required. And if you can't wear a mask, you have to wear a face shield. If we do have on-site food consumption, like a food truck or food sampling, we are then required to follow the restaurant guidelines under the executive order, which means we would have to have designated seating, 6 people per table, and then tables cleaned and sanitized as they do in the restaurant. So we then trigger following those restaurant guidelines. And then the venue, the live music, this is pretty basic because we have the gazebo. Like, this would be easy to follow because we have the gazebo. There just has to be separation between the performers and the patrons. They can't leave that area, etc. So if we add the food trucks and the concerts to the farmers market with the vendors, we're now a venue, and it's a lot more restrictive. So we would have to follow those capacity restrictions that I had previously talked about, which would be 775 people in the park. And so with that, I feel like we would have to set some parameters of the park so we could control how many people are coming and going. And really, social distancing is a really important compliance item. And when we have all of those components added together, and a lot of movement in the park, it's really difficult to have that social distancing. So with that said, I have a recommendation, and it's for discussion tonight, but I'm going to present what I would think might work well for just this year and why. I think looking at having the farmers market and vendors on Tuesdays is a good idea. We don't have the capacity limits, no on-site food consumption. We can provide hand sanitizer, and there's going to be less people there. So it should be easier to follow social distancing. We would have to reduce the number of vendors just so we can follow that appropriate distance that's required. And I would suggest we have priority vendor acceptance with our farmers market, first priority craft vendors, and there so on. And I think starting the week of June 14th is a good time frame. But I think it's important to get people back together, and I think having a concert in the park is doable if that's the only focus of the night, where you come and you sit down, you find your spot, and you pretty much stay there for the concert. You're not going to be getting up to get food. You're not going to be going and walking around throughout the park to shop. So my suggestion is maybe we can find an alternative day for the concert series. And I know Elk River, they're doing their concert series on Thursdays for about 9 weeks. And it's kind of that same thing. Like, you get there by this time, you find your spot, you're socially distanced, and then, you're there for the concert and you leave. And then I'm suggesting, or my thought is, no food trucks until those restaurant restrictions possibly change. And then we could look at adding those in if restrictions change between now and the summer. So a couple reasons quick why I think this could work, or some benefits to it, at least while we're still navigating COVID-19. It brings the event back downtown, which was a big request. It provides the opportunities for the vendors to participate again, which is a source of revenue for them. We can resume concerts in the park. We can encourage activity downtown more than one night a week, and it gives people something to do on multiple nights. I think these guidelines and restrictions to follow, if we separate these two components, seems manageable with the staff and resources. And I'm confident that we can do it safely and in compliance. And a representative from the state of Minnesota, who's in the executive order compliance, working with public health, he thought this suggestion I'm sharing tonight was a good one. and confirmed with everything I've presented tonight on what we'd be responsible for compliance. So he did agree with this. He thought this was a good idea for this year. So this is where I'm gonna turn it over to discussion. And as much as I, like everybody else, miss this a lot, I think we just have to be mindful that it's not gonna quite look like this yet this year. And, you know, we have to come up with a plan that we can start making steps back to getting the community out, but together safely. And so with that, open to discussion and would like to try to get some direction tonight on how to move forward.
Well, it's not as good as I'd hoped, but it's not as bad as I could figure either. So it's somewhere in the middle, which is probably good. I'm just wondering, since everybody is, well, they're kind of used to both being on Tuesday, but I was just, for discussion purposes, wondering if we couldn't keep Tuesday, the concert series, and then have the farmer's market maybe on a Monday or a Thursday, just because so many people are used to the Tuesday, even if they don't go to the farmer's market. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, and I could certainly look into that. The thing with the farmers market vendors is they do attend multiple events, and Tuesdays probably work really well for them in Forest Lake because they might be booked in other communities on Mondays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. So not to say that that's not an option. We might lose some, we might gain some, right? So.
Could check with them or.
Yep, absolutely.
I think though, you could make that same argument about the farmer's market, that people are used to having that on Tuesday. So it's probably 6 in one, half dozen in the other.
It is. You just don't get as many people coming for the farmers markets as you come for the concert. But you're right. They certainly enjoy both if they're there.
Jamie, would the concert goers be able to bring their own picnic lunch? I'm not sure I've seen any guidance or picnic dinner. Just sit on a blanket and eat. I'm wondering if you could do a, picnic and concert or something, bring your own dinner.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I've thought of that, and I would just want to seek clarification from the state, because how I've read it is that no, you all have to be sitting down for eating and drinking, but if they bring their own and they're sitting in their spot, would that be acceptable or not? So
yeah,
a point of clarification.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's not like they're moving back and forth to get food, right? They're sitting on a blanket probably. And
right.
I do think you'd have to clarify that with the Department of Health though, because the original order required a designated space, a spot so that they could contain and sanitize and otherwise. So I just think we should
clarify it.
Just clarify it.
I would have to clarify it because I wouldn't know myself directly. Yeah. If we could, I'd like to hope we can. If it's bring your own and you're sitting down and you're just staying there essentially, unless you're going to the bathroom. So I think that's a good point to clarify if we could do.
In part of the method in my madness to asking that question is it might happen anyway. And so it would be nice to know, I mean, you're either going to be policing it or you might have permission for it. So I don't know, just a thought. I don't know that I've seen any straightforward guidance on that.
I haven't.
So I'm curious as to kind of what the recommendation.
Kathy, you brought up something that I had on my mind too, is in reference to that policing piece of it. Is, we've got picnic tables there. So do we have to do what a restaurant does and put signage up that they can't use them? If they do, then we would be responsible for sanitizing them like a restaurant, I would assume. But then my other question is in relation to the capacity for the concerts, because depending upon who it is, it may want to look like that picture. So I think we need to think about how we would manage capacities. What does that look like?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think we would have to have a process. And if it's just a concert on one individual night with nothing else, I know the city during COVID-19 did obtain or purchase some event barricades in a sense where they're like portable, and we could if we had to define the event area where they're, where the concert attendees are sitting within that defined space, I think that's something that we could do. Public Works could set those up around the gazebo, and that's, that area I've depicted in the map. But having a process would have to be part of that to know that when we reached capacity. So I don't know yet if that's a ticketed thing or if it's first come, first serve. I'd have to do a little more understanding of what that would look like, but I feel comfortable that we could come up with a solution for managing the capacity.
So
Are
On the-
picnic tables being, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Jason.
no, that's okay. On the capacity, Jamie, for the concert, it was like 700. We could do the 748, right? Or is
If it's just the concert without
if it's just
anything else, it was about, I would say rounded up, maybe 350 people.
so if if it's just the concert on Thursday nights, could you use that whole area and then maybe they'd have a speaker that would go back? So it would be like sitting in the back and sitting in the front. Could we do that?
Yeah, we could certainly put more, if we had the concert on its own independent night, we could certainly use the whole park space. So the capacity of 774
Okay.
wanted to, but then we would really have to make, that's our perimeter then, right? So we have to
Right.
make sure that we know how many people are within that space,
Okay.
which could be a little more difficult to manage that, but I don't
Oh,
think it's impossible. But I think having a more controlled environment for just the concert seems doable and something that we can manage. And then if we just have the farmers market with craft and other vendors, we don't have to count people or worry about enforcing masks and other components. It's just more of come and shop and then leave. It's not a
Yep.
social gathering.
right.
So I think we could work on the concert capacity and what that looks like and that process. And I think we could come up with a solution for that.
Yeah, I think that looks really good, actually.
Yeah, I think it's a
Doing
good,
a Tuesday, Thursday, I think it's awesome. I mean, that way we can get the most of everybody in Forest Lake going to doing a farmer's market on a Tuesday and a concert on a Thursday. I think that's awesome, actually. I think it's absolutely awesome.
Eddie, were you going to say something?
no, I was just gonna say, I like the recommendation as well. I think it gets us getting back to having both things available to the community. I like it.
How do we ensure social distancing? Do we draw circles or how does that work?
For seating for the concert, I think Elk River, and I can circle back, but I think that they're helping, if you show up and you're going into the concert, they're helping kind of assign those initial seats. So, okay, you're going to go here, and kind of like when you're all trying to park at an event and you have some direction on where you're going to go and where you're going to park. I think we could do that. We probably could staff that just so we know that initially people are spaced out accordingly. But from there, then it's kind of on their own to maintain that social distance requirement. So
I think they're pretty used to that now. And like you say, we have to have some self-responsibility. But a lot of us are down there anyway, and we can certainly encourage if we see something too close, encourage them, to be a little bit more separate.
yeah, I think we can post signage and do our best to give those friendly reminders throughout the evening if we run into any situations. But I think having them at least separate, we have two different environments that we can, I think, control better, or at least have a better understanding of how many people we have in the park for this particular thing. And I think that we would, as a city, would feel comfortable with that. Whereas if it's kind of just a free for all and people are coming and going and walking all over the sidewalks, I think that would just be very difficult and we would not be in compliance.
I think communication will be key. I think it's gonna be really important for Jackie to make sure whatever communication we have on this, I'd like to see her communication draft on this because I think it's important. People are gonna be excited that we're having concerts back, but if we're restricting the number, we have to find a nice way to make sure we set expectations too. so that
Right.
people aren't getting expectations when they come there. If we had to say we're at capacity, or I just think it's really, really important to, this is a big celebration. We're making progress towards back to normal. And this is one step closer, but her communication on this is going to be really important.
And so if the idea is generally, if there's consensus or, it seems like a good idea, the only point of discussion, we are partnering with the Forest Lake Community Education, and they do have, because typically we've just used Tuesdays at the park, right? So they do have a couple short things planned on Wednesday and Thursday evenings. So if, to me, Thursday seems like a good concert in the park night. They do have yoga in the parks that's going to be scheduled from 7 to 8. So I'm not saying that we can't work around that or figure something else out. There is that schedule conflict. Otherwise, I don't know what people think about Mondays, or even, I know Fridays, a lot of people leave town, but what are your thoughts on a preferred date for a concert? If we keep the vendors on Tuesday.
Tuesday, Thursday are the very best dates you can get.
So potentially that may drive kind of our decision on what goes where, because I don't think having yoga in the park on 7 to 8 p.m. on a Thursday would conflict with vendors being there.
On
I
Thursday.
don't think that's as conflicting as a concert being played. So, that's just something to work through and figure out, is there flexibility for that program to shift times, or, work through that, I guess.
You have to figure out how many do they expect? So working again with them might, they might be able to, there's a big park, they might go way at the other end.
Yeah, well, I've been working with them. So the maximum capacity for social gatherings right now is 50. And we were talking about using the gazebo area and then that grass, the center of the park. However, it could be likely relocated to another area of the park if needed. So if we did Thursdays for concerts, is 5 to 7 seem like an acceptable time, or is that too early for a concert?
Little early.
Because I think like a 6 to 8 or a 6:30 to 8:30 would be preferred.
I think so.
I
Why wouldn't we think about that? That would, for
Well,
working.
we are thinking about it.
Okay, good.
That's why we're here. So I guess we don't have to hash out every detail of that. I can take by next Tuesday, come back with more detail on dates and times based on what I find out with community education, and talk to some of the vendors to see what their availability would be like.
Well, just out of curiosity, how many people are in the yoga? How many participants are in the yoga class, Jamie?
Well, the registration for that goes live, I believe, in 2 days, so on Thursday. And the maximum registrants, I believe, is going to be around 50. But
It is, okay.
Could be 10, there could be 20. We just don't know yet. So
would that? I mean, the next closest park, would they be willing to maybe going over to Cedar Park, since there's some flat ground there for yoga? Or
yeah, I could ask them about relocating. That's a good point. So maybe
Okay.
the Thursday yoga class could be relocated to a different park, and frees up our Thursdays for the concerts. And our concert preferred time would be 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. on Thursdays. So I'll shoot for that, and keep the farmers market and vendors. Just going to the farmers market and vendors, if that stays on Tuesday, I was going to suggest about 5 to 8 p.m. I think 3 hours. I think that's what we did last summer, and it seemed like that was a good amount of time.
I think so.
Yeah.
5 to
I
8.
think any earlier works, and 8 o'clock is, kind of a good end time. So 5 to 8 sounds good to me.
Okay, so I'm going to plan on keeping the farmers market, invite back other vendors. I'll figure out what that capacity can be, but we'll start accepting vendor applications for Tuesdays. And that will be from 5 to 8 p.m. at Lakeside. And then I'll check on Thursdays, 6:30 to 8:30 for a concert series.
Thank you for coming up with this kind of an in-between idea,
You're welcome.
you know.
I think it's a good step. I feel comfortable from staff perspective and representing the city to make sure that we're compliant with executive orders. Something that I feel like I'm comfortable overseeing and making sure everything's in compliance. So I think it'll be a good step, and I'm excited to get people together. And it gives them a little bit more of an opportunity to do so. If they can't Tuesday nights, well, maybe Thursday will work. So
I think it gives people there's a couple things to do during the week then versus just one day. So thank you. I know you put a lot of work into working with the Department of Health and everything else. So thank you very much for doing that.
you're welcome. I'm excited. I miss being down at the park too. So
Good job on everything, Jamie.
Yeah.
thank you.
I echo that. That's a lot of stuff to do, Jamie. Great job.
Thank you.
I
Yeah,
think that contract,
Looks like a good plan.
Good.
It really does. And it feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels good.
Seemed like
Yeah.
all
Good
along
night,
ago when we were
right?
like, oh, this is killing us that we just can't be together, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
compromise.
I think it'll be good, and I think it will be well received by the community. I think they'll be excited, and I think it's something that is very manageable. And I think starting June 14th is not a problem at all. Like I said, farmers don't even have produce till the end of June, early July. I think school's out late this year, so if we're comfortable with that timeline, I think that works for me to have a couple months now to really get everything planned and up and running. So
I think graduation's like the 10th or 11th.
I think, yeah,
It's
yeah,
the,
like
it's the 8th for Leela, but
I saw the 10th for Forest Lake area schools. It gives us a couple weeks to get our feet wet with it before the 4th of July. And then it gives, if we need a little time to tweak anything, gives us a couple weeks of getting under our belt and then have that 4th of July break, and then we'll be back. So, all right. Well, I appreciate your feedback and your time. If there's any other questions on this? Otherwise, I think, Terry, it's your turn.
well, it's just, as long as we're together, I was just wondering if we could concrete the spring fling meeting while we're all here, or that's why I want to wait till this discussion was over.
I will send out an invite for tomorrow at 3:30.
Okay.
Okay.
Just haven't quite had time to get to that yet. I'm
No,
heading
that's fine.
2 things off my list first. So
How is Jackie doing? Is Jackie going to be coming back?
I don't know when, but yeah, I'll follow up with you on that. But she will be back. It's just a matter of not sure quite when.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions?
So Jamie, I was just gonna say, I've seen a little positive chatter about Bay Park too,
Oh yeah.
which is good. There's the new equipment is being put out there, and I've seen some of the people in that area like posting the picture, and they're pretty excited about it coming. So that'll be nice when it's done. That'll be another communication opportunity to promote that there's a new facility there. So thanks to you and Dave for that work.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, and I can touch more on that at our meeting next Tuesday. I'll share a little more updates and pictures, and that's nearing completion, and I think people are excited to see that. So that'll be great.
And this group probably should know too, we did approve the agreement between the city and Stella's last night regarding the Castlewood property in support of the parking lot and the building rental and those sorts of things. So that is also done and taken care of.
Things are coming together.
The course has been really busy already, but
Wow.
I think this is a record start, from my perspective anyway, just observing, but we've had some really nice weather early. So
yeah, I was very happy to see. I was actually first surprised they were opening when they did, but I was very excited about that and just being able to leverage that opportunity and with the nice weather. So I think that's gonna, I see it busy all the time too when it's a nice day. So it's really refreshing to see that. And hopefully that momentum continues throughout the season. I have been reading some interesting models of like now the work from home people are looking to get out and they're actually looking for 9-hole courses because they can get that in fairly quickly. And I was just an interesting concept with this COVID world. And so hopefully it continues to be a really good year for the golf course.
I actually know a couple people that are doing that pretty regularly. They'll take off midday or late morning, go play a round of golf and then go back to work.
Yep. I think that's becoming a pretty common trend. So
Yeah.
it works good for us and it's nice to get people out and have that break. So
Yeah.
So with that being said, we do meet again next Tuesday, our regular meeting, April 20th at 5:00 p.m. So I'll have any additional items for you guys next day. I think we just need a motion to adjourn, Terry.
Yes. Do we have a motion?
Move we adjourn?
Second.
Any discussion? Can you just raise your hand to
Yes.
signify?
Please. Okay, it looks like I see everybody raising to adjourn.
All
Thank
right.
For your time, everybody. Have a good evening and we'll talk.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Amy, do you have 1 sec?
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second here. Hang on 1 second.
Okay.
Stop. Okay, I think I stopped recording.